Okay, let's do this little simulation here. We'll set this up. So we're just going to shatter this wall with this ball. So that's what we're going to create. So let's start fresh. So let's do a new scene. Don't save. I'm going to drop in my FX menu. I just need three pieces here. I just need the ground. So we just did a plane here. And we can set these as we go. I already have bullet enabled. You can see to enable bullet windows, settings and preferences. Whoops. Plugin manager. Just type in bullet. And you can see bullet is loaded and auto-loaded. So now it's pretty much ready to go, and then it'll show up here in your drop-down, sorry, in your tabs. And then we want to set this to static because this is the ground plane. It's not going to move. And let's just do a cube here. Okay. And actually, I'm going to make this cube a little thinner here. Oops. Just so we make sure that the object can actually get through this wall. So it's going to be about just a bit thinner there. And on this one, we actually want to do edit delete by type history because we're going to shatter this one. So let's do effects, shatter. And this is what the settings that I have. I'm just going to reset those though. So I just went about 50 for the shatter, and then the seed value is just the randomness, and then make sure triangulate is on and then hide. It'll just hide that original geometry. And go ahead and hit create. If you get an error here, it's because you didn't delete the history. So make sure that history is deleted. Could freeze the transforms too, but in this quick demo, it's not going to make a difference. So now that's nice and shattered up. And then the last thing that we need is the sphere. Okay, and actually, before we do that, sorry, don't do that yet. While this is selected, let's go ahead and add the set for this. So we can do the set. Now we can add the sphere. It just saves us then trying to select it later. And let's just make this an active rigid body. And while this is selected as well, we can actually go down in this list and change this to Hall or Sphere. Since it's a sphere, we can make it a sphere. Should work fine. And then we can go ahead and play this simulation, and the wall's going to explode. So let's fix that first. So we go on the shatter here. You can see we don't have any nodes. So we want the bullet solver node. And you'll see eventually in this list the set state for the initial objects that we just have selected. So you can see in the nodes a bullet solver 1, this is all the solver settings, but then the solid shatter set initial state. This is this object here. So the solid shatter 1, you can see it here. So this is the node for that. If we were to add more of these, you would see more of those nodes. So we want to switch this to Hall, and instantly we'll see a difference, but the wall still breaks because it's a broken wall under gravity. But if we do it's sleeping, so that means it's not broken. Now it'll just kind of stay in place. And really the other parameters should be fine. You might have to change the collision margin down to 0 if it's still breaking. And if you don't get a good wall here, it could be because the thickness of the wall, is too thick, or you don't have enough shatter. Okay, so those are things to check. So that's why I went with a thinner wall with a high shatter. All right, last thing we want to do is make this object kind of bust through the wall there. So we can do the rigid body here. And this is set to dynamic. So you can do static, which is, object doesn't move. Kinematic, this would be an object that's moving and animated. And then dynamic. So this is the one that we're going to stay on, is dynamic. And we can actually switch and change the initial velocity. This will be, depending on how you created your scene, you'll have to use the correct axis for this. So X, Y, or Z. I can see that mine is X, and mine's going to be in the negative X. So initial velocity, let's do like negative 200. And let's go ahead and rewind this and hit play. And I just slam right into the wall and bounce off. Okay, so that wall is pretty solid right now. So we can go double check a couple of these features. Let's go back into the wall. And here under the shatter, so we can see the mass, we can see its initial sleeping value. It doesn't have any glue, the glue shapes on, so we should be okay. So really what we can do now is just increase the mass of the ball. So let's just say, I don't know, let's just try 50, and let's go hit it again, and we're still not able to bust through that wall. So let's just increase that mass of the ball again. And actually, sometimes this happens if you don't start the simulation all the way back at 1. And when you make a change, it doesn't always save. So let's just go ahead and pump that into 50, make sure I hit enter. And now you can see I'm cracking through that wall. So now what I can do is just add a little bit more velocity to that. So let's pump it way up just to see what happens. Let's do negative 1,000. And that didn't save again. I did the same thing I told you to do. So let's make sure we're set it frame 1 or frame 0, depending on where you're at. Let's do negative 1,000, enter. Now we're set. Go ahead and play it. You can see that's just too much. The simulation can't even handle that. It's moving too fast. So let's try negative 500. See what happens. There we go. Now we're crushing through that wall with a little bit more velocity. And that wall's just kind of breaking apart as it goes. We could play with things like the mass again. So you can see with a lower or higher mass, that wall's going to break apart depending on how that object goes through. And maybe the velocity is still up a little bit too high. Should we hit enter? There we go, we're set. Oh, no, that's it. It's got to be up there. Let's try and put the mass back up. So, whoops. So you can play with these values till you get something that you like. Make sure you're all the way back at 1 before you do that. I have a bad habit of not doing that. Let's just crank it up. So it's not a bad idea to just crank it up to see what that does. And that's looking decent. Just going right through that wall. So we might be able to take this down a little bit. Oops, and I did it again because, there we go. There. Now we're getting there, so maybe, okay, I think we're good. Oops. Not too bad. So hopefully you enjoyed this one.